All right, what we're going to do today is we're going to break down options of what to do with an old 401k. So this is an account that you contributed to at your old employer. At this point, you no longer work there. Potentially you work at another employer, or maybe you're not working at an employer who has a 401k option where you're working now. But let me break down the 4 things that you can do with your old 401k that's sitting at your old employer. The first option is probably the easiest option of all. You can do nothing. The second option would be you can actually just take a distribution from the account. Because you broke service, you're allowed to take a distribution. The third option would be to roll the account over to a rollover IRA account. And the fourth option potentially would be to move this 401k account to a new employer's 401k account. Now, as we go through this, I'm going to break down the pros and cons of each of these 4 options. And hopefully at the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to make a decision based on your individual. Okay, let's break down option 1. Option 1 would be you can do nothing with the account. You can leave the account at your old employer, continue to keep the investments as they're set up currently. You're still allowed to trade in that account, so if you want to move the investments around, you're still allowed to move the investments around. The one thing you cannot do is that you cannot make new contributions to the 401k. Now, one caveat I want to kind of talk about a little bit is that if the account has a fairly small balance, and from my experience, a fairly small balance would be around under $5,000, potentially your old employer can kick you out of the plan. They usually say they're going to kick you out within 45 days of termination from employment. And at that point, depending on what you do, they'll send you a check for the account. Unfortunately, they'll take out taxes. They'll take 20% of the account out and send you a check. I recommend just give your old employer a call, ask them if they will cash you out, because if they do, it becomes fairly complex on how to get the money back into a qualified plan if they cut you a check. But if you have an account balance over $5,000, or if they're not going to cash you out of the account for a small balance, again, you can just do nothing. It's probably the easiest option on this list, and just you can go with that. Now, option number 2 is if you break service with your old employer, you're actually allowed to take a distribution from the account. Now, I highly recommend you don't take a distribution from the account for a number of reasons. Those reasons I'll break down in a minute, but I wouldn't go with the take the distribution option at this point. The problem with this distribution account, taking the distribution out of the account, would be you are going to be subject to taxes and most likely penalties on these funds. Now let's take easy examples. Say, for example, you have $10,000 in this account. What happens is if you ask for a distribution from your old employer is required to send 20% of the account over to the IRS. So you'll receive a check in this scenario. If the account balance was $10,000, they send off 20% to the IRS. You'll receive a check for $8,000. On top of that, you add that $10,000 amount to your income for the year in which you took it. So for example, you take it this year. When you do your taxes in the beginning of next year, you add that $10,000 to your income for the year. If that throws you into a higher tax bracket of 20%, you're going to owe more money on that $10,000. Again, the full $10,000, not the $8,000 in which you received. On top of that, if you're under the age of 59 and a half, more likely than not, you're going to have to pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty. And again, that's on the full $10,000 of the account. So if you do take the distribution, I recommend to hold $1,000 out so that you can pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty at the beginning of next year when you end up doing your taxes. Again, so to make numbers easy, we're talking about $10,000. If your tax bracket blended is about 20%, they prepaid your taxes for you, so you won't owe taxes, but you will owe the early withdrawal penalty of 10%. So you're losing 30% of the account. You're going to clear $7,000. And again, unfortunately, you just blew out a retirement vehicle that's not intended to take right now. So again, I don't recommend this option. I don't recommend you take a distribution. Again, if you need the money, you need to do what you have to do. But do not do this if you can avoid it. Now, the third option would be to move the account over from your old 401k account to a rollover IRA account. Now you can go, if you have a favorite mutual fund company, you basically open up the IRA account with that company. At that point, you can move the funds over to that mutual fund company, over to potentially your favorite brokerage, and at that point, the monies can invest in many different investments. At this point, you're tied to the old 401k investment choices. So if you do nothing, one of the negatives by doing nothing is you're tied to the investment choices that are sitting with your old employer. If you take the money away from your old employer, roll it to a rollover IRA account, at that point, the world is your oyster, and you are eligible to invest in almost anything you want to invest in. If you want to invest in index funds, you want to invest in ETFs, you want to invest in individual company stocks, if you have a favorite mutual fund that you want to invest in, you can invest in that. So by moving the money over into the rollover IRA account, your investment options grow tremendously. And again, by doing this, there are no tax consequences, no early withdrawal penalties. The money stays in the account, tax deferred and ready for withdrawal when you go to retire. Okay, option number 4 is basically to move the old 401k over to the new 401k. Now, you talk to both parties involved, you make sure that both parties can accommodate the move, and that one will send it over and the other will accept. And again, by doing this, the money still grows tax deferred, there are no penalties, the account just goes from one employer to the other. Now, some of the negatives of doing this is, again, you're still tied to the investment options that are sitting at your new 401k provider. And again, they have a fiduciary responsibility to you that they have to have investments that basically are diversified and that they probably have some that are fairly aggressive, fairly conservative. They have probably a pretty good group similar to your old 401k, but just take a look, make sure they do. Again, by going to the IRA option, again, you can almost invest in anything. One of the big pluses to roll this money over to your new 401k would be that potentially down the line, if you want to take a loan against your 401k, the money that you move from the old employer's 401k to the new employer's 401k, that money becomes part of that loan calculation. And for the most part, a loan calculation becomes half the account up to $50,000, and you can borrow that money for 5 years. In the notes of this video, I break down pros and cons of taking a loan against your 401k. Again, it's too long for this video, but I will send a link in this video at the bottom. Take a look at it, and from there you can decide if a 401k loan is right for you. But again, by moving this money from the old 401k to the new 401k, that money becomes part of that loan calculation. And again, just the negative is you're bound by the the new 401ks, their investment options. So this kind of concludes your 4 major choices on what to do with your 401k that's sitting at your old employer. If you found this useful, again, please like and subscribe the videos. Thanks. Have a great day.